In this video, we're going to look at section 1-1 in the book, Statistical and Critical Thinking. Start with some definitions. Data are collections of observations, such as measurements, genders, or survey responses. A single data value is called a datum. The term data is plural, so it's correct to say data are, not data is. Statistics is the science of planning studies and experiments. Obtaining data and organizing, summarizing, presenting, analyzing, and interpreting those data, and then drawing conclusions based on them. A population is the complete collection of all measurements or data that are being considered. Typically, a population is the complete collection of data that we would like to make inferences about. A census is the collection of data from every member of the population, and a sample is a sub-collection of members selected from a population. Because populations are often very large, a common objective of the use of statistics is to obtain data from a sample and then use those data to form a conclusion about the population. So for example, in an article in the American Journal of Public Health, it was stated that there are 38 million carbon monoxide detectors installed in the United States. When 30 of them were randomly selected and tested, it was found that 12 of them failed to provide an alarm in hazardous carbon monoxide conditions. In this case, the population and sample are as follows. The population is all 38 million carbon monoxide detectors in the United States. The sample is the 30 carbon monoxide detectors that were selected and tested. The objective is to use the sample data as a basis for drawing a conclusion about the population of all carbon monoxide detectors, and methods of statistics are helpful in drawing such conclusions. To prepare a statistical study, we want to look at the context. What do the data represent, and what is the goal of the study? We want to look at the source of the data. Are the data from a source with a special interest so that there is pressure to obtain results that are favorable to the source? For example, a lot of studies that talk about the health of artificial sweeteners are sponsored by the sugar companies, which would prefer that people use sugar instead of, say, NutraSweet. The sampling method. Were the data collected in a way that is unbiased, or were the data collected in a way that is biased, such as a procedure in which respondents volunteered to participate? To analyze, we graph the data, explore the data. We ask, are there any outliers, which are numbers very far away from almost all of the other data? We ask what important statistics summarize the data, such as the mean and standard deviation. We'll talk about them more in chapter 3. We ask how the data are distributed. We ask, are there missing data? We ask, did many selected subjects refuse to respond? And then we apply statistical methods and use technology to obtain results. And then we draw our conclusions. We look for significance. Do the results have statistical significance? Do the results have practical significance? A voluntary response sample, or self-selected sample, is one in which the respondents themselves decide whether to be included. Some examples of voluntary response samples are internet polls, in which people online can decide whether to respond, mail-in polls, in which people can decide whether to reply, and telephone call-in polls, in which newspaper, radio, or television announcements ask that you voluntarily call a special number to register your opinion. It should be noted that, by their nature, all of these types of polls are seriously flawed, because we should not make conclusions about a population on the basis of samples with a strong possibility of bias. For example, on Nightline, viewers were asked to call in with their opinions about whether the United Nations headquarters should remain in the United States. Viewers then decided themselves whether to call in with their opinions, and 67% of 186,000 respondents said that the United Nations should be moved out of the United States. In a separate and independent survey, 500 respondents were randomly selected and surveyed. and 38% of this group wanted the United Nations to move out of the United States. The two polls produced dramatically different results. Even though the Nightline poll involved 186,000 volunteer respondents, the much smaller poll of 500 randomly selected respondents is more likely to provide better results because of the superior sampling method. That is, people were not chosen by themselves. The people who responded to the Nightline poll were very likely people who had strong opinions about whether or not the United Nations stayed in the United States. The next several slides discuss items that could cause problems when analyzing data. Misleading conclusions. When forming a conclusion based on a statistical analysis, we should make statements that are clear even to those who have no understanding of statistics and its terminology. We should carefully avoid making statements not justified by the statistical analysis. Correlation does not imply causation. Sample data reported instead of measured. When collecting data from people, it is better to take measurements yourself instead of asking subjects to report results. Ask people what they weigh and you are likely to get their desired weights, not their actual weights. People tend to round, usually down, and sometimes way down. When asked, someone with a weight of 187 pounds might respond that he or she weighs 160 pounds. Accurate weights are collected by using a scale to measure weights, not by asking what they weigh. Loaded questions. If survey questions are not worded carefully, the results of a study can be misleading. Survey questions can be loaded or intentionally worded to elicit a desired response. Here are the actual rates of yes responses for the two different wordings of a question. 97% of respondents said yes to the question, should the president have the line item veto to eliminate waste? Whereas 57% said yes to the question, should the president have the line item veto or not? Order of questions. Sometimes survey questions are unintentionally loaded by such factors as the order of items being considered. See the following two questions from a poll conducted in Germany, along with the very different response rates. Would you say that traffic contributes more or less to air pollution than industry? 45% blamed traffic and 27% blamed industry. On the other hand, would you say that industry contributes more or less to air pollution than traffic? 24% blamed traffic and 57% blamed industry. In addition to the order of items within a question, as illustrated above, the order of separate questions could also affect responses. Non-response. A non-response occurs when someone either refuses to respond to a survey question or is unavailable. When people are asked survey questions, some firmly refuse to answer. The refusal rate has been growing in recent years, partly because many persistent telemarketers try to sell goods or services by beginning with a sales pitch that initially sounds like it is part of an opinion poll. In Lies, Damn Lies, and Statistics, Michael Wheeler makes this important observation. People who refuse to talk to pollsters are likely to be different from those who do not. Some may be fearful of strangers and others jealous of their privacy, but their refusal to talk demonstrates that their view of the world around them is markedly different from that of those people who will let poll takers into their homes. Percentages. Some studies cite misleading or unclear percentages. Note that 100% of some quantity is all of it. But if there are references made to percentages that exceed 100%, such references are often not justified. In an ad for The Club, a device used to discourage car thefts, it was stated that the club reduces your odds of car theft by 400%. If the club eliminated all car thefts, it would reduce the odds of car theft by 100%. So the 400% figure is misleading and doesn't make sense.